Clowns. Clowns.
In our time together on this channel, we've seen our fair share of creepypastas driven entirely by surprisingly marketable villainous characters with penchant for blood, violence, excessive gore, and not much else. You see so many of these impastas all over the internet that it makes you wonder how it's possible for any of them to stand out against the metaphorical tidal wave of characters and stories exactly like these. And yet somehow, by some sort of miracle, more and more keep popping up and rising in popularity and notoriety. You'd think the members of the creepypasta community would grow bored with these characters and, ironically, treat the shocking content and rampant gore within these stories with complete and total indifference. But the opposite is really the case, and none of this has stopped today's topic from becoming one of the single most popular creepypastas ever made. Today's story is Laughing Jack. This is a story I've been warned about reviewing from a very reliable source. When I looked at Tikitobi, I was surprised at the number of people defending the story and the disproportionate number of dislikes compared to some of my other videos on equally or more popular pastas, despite it being better produced and edited than some of those other videos. People grow attached to these characters, so I've taken time to try and ease some new viewers or old friends who may like the pasta we're talking about today into a nice, comfortable atmosphere before I tell them that Laughing Jack is a big fucking steaming pile of garbage. Holy shit! Okay, maybe I'm being unfair to you guys. I do respect your intelligence and taste, but I have to take precautions because this is the only story I've been warned about reviewing so far due to how potential fans could react. So if some of those people are out there, probably new viewers coming to my channel for the first time, I implore you to listen to what I have to say on the story before you leave your angry comments and dislikes. I mean, you'll probably still leave them, and there's not much I can do about it, but at least give me a chance before you do it. So let's get started. Well, this one won't be hard. The only real character we have with any sort of agency in the story is our main character, who is so full of personality and charm that she doesn't even have a first name. So I'll just call her Mama Luigi from now on. There's also her 5-year-old son James and their dog, Fido. Yeah, Fido. You couldn't have even taken a name from some movie with a dog in it, like Chance, or Marley, or Baxter. Hey, wait a sec.
Oh, Baxter, you are my little gentleman.
Anyway, I do actually kind of like how the protagonist is a single mother, since that's not a perspective gained in the vast majority of creepypastas. However, it's ultimately used to its lowest and most manipulative potential. We'll come back to this. There's also not really much to her as far as personality goes. I get that this story is comparatively short, or maybe I'm just saying that because I just got done doing Godzilla NES, but you could have taken the time to give her a few more personality traits besides is a mom. She worries about her kid like any normal mom would. She seems to have a pretty normal life. Everything's too damn normal. Back in middle school and high school, me and my friends knew this kid who seemed so normal that it was actually kind of hilarious, and we figured there had to be something up with him. But if there was, we never found it out. Too much normalcy can be weird, but more importantly, it can be boring. The son James is likewise largely lacking in personality. He's really just a vehicle for Mama Luigi and by extension the audience to learn about Laughing Jack. In fact, I'm pretty sure every line of dialogue he speaks is about Laughing Jack. Laughing Jack himself doesn't really have much of a character at all. He falls into the same pitfalls as previous characters in his genre where there isn't really anything to him besides how much he likes to kill people in particularly gruesome ways. He's got this clown theme going on for him, but he doesn't really do much with it. He just kind of acts like a normal, incredibly gruesome killer. Now Fido, on the other hand, I've really got to give the story props to for being one of the best written characters I've seen in a creepypasta. He really caught me off guard with the depth that he portrayed. I'd talk about him some more, but I'd honestly be here for hours. So let's just keep moving along. Now, something I've noticed with a lot of these types of stories is that they typically take place in a perfectly ordinary suburban neighborhood. Jeff the Killer took place in a nice neighborhood that was inexplicably overrun with murderous teenagers. Tiki Toby was just in some neighborhood. Clockwork went to a normal school and lived in a normal neighborhood. Eyeless Jack was just in some house or something. It all compounds and continues to give you the impression that you really are just reading the same thing over and over and over again. And Laughing Jack is no exception to this rule. You might not see this as an issue because they're just using an ordinary setting, and there's no problem with that. And to an extent you're right, but there's more to it than that. You see, settings are just as much characters as the people who inhabit them. So when you have a setting that's a generic suburban neighborhood, it doesn't leave us with anything to connect with or think about. The suburban setting isn't being used to any effect here. It's just being used because it's very likely that members of the audience grew up or currently live in a similar setting. This is the same case with other serial killer pastas we've seen in the past. The idea that evil can come from anywhere is one that's interesting enough, and I think is part of what these pastas are trying to achieve, but it's destroyed because the location that you set up this evil in is completely uninteresting and lacking in personality, much like the bland characters projected onto them. It's the literature equivalent of eating plain oatmeal. I don't want plain oatmeal, Mom. I want the kind with the sugary dinosaur eggs that hatch into sugary dinosaurs when you heat up the water. So what's this pasta even about, anyway? Well, it's a decently short story, so a summary won't take long. There's a nameless single mother living with her son and dog who live a perfectly ordinary life. When out of nowhere, and for no discernible or explained reason, Mama Luigi's son starts talking to what she interprets as an imaginary friend. Spoiler alert, it's not imaginary and it's not friendly. He describes his imaginary friend as Laughing Jack, a horrible-looking yet surprisingly marketable clown thing with a swirly cone nose, sharp teeth, and long arms. I'm gonna stop right here and say this would never ever be the work of any child's imagination. Kids don't like clowns. The only people I know who do like clowns like them because they're so goddamn creepy, not in spite of that.
I actually like clowns, but I admit, part of their appeal to me is that they scare the living hell out of some people, which I find hilarious. You know, it's just some guy dressed up silly, acting goofy, dancing around, and apparently striking terror into the hearts of others.
Anyway, I do like how the mom here doesn't instantly assume it actually is some sort of paranormal entity or a stalker and writes it off as an imaginary friend. You'd think this sort of thing would go without saying, but there's a pasta later this season that will completely destroy that expectation. After a few tense swaps, Mama Luigi puts James to bed and goes off to sleep herself, but finds herself troubled by a nightmare. This sequence reminds me of what some horror movies will do, where they insert dream sequences that are basically completely irrelevant to everything at hand and only serve the purpose of having spooky stuff in them to put in the trailer.
Cut to nighttime sleeping. Maybe throw in a dream sequence.
You gotta
just
throw
for
in a
jump
dream
scare.
sequence,
Dream sequence. Well, someone's in your room. It's Mr. Herring. Oh, I woke up.
Now this one is somewhat relevant to what's happening because it centers around Laughing Jack, but it doesn't really mean anything in terms of advancing the story. Basically what happens is that she finds herself in a spooky amusement park or circus and runs through it for a while before being entranced by an accordion playing Pop Goes the Weasel, though the story refers to it by the substantially funnier name of Squeezebox. She follows the music into a circus tent where a bunch of lights come on and a bunch of horribly mutilated children approach her and claw at her while there's laughter in the background. A big part of my problem with this section, besides mutilated children, is that it essentially wastes 2 paragraphs on things that aren't followed up on, and this story isn't all that long to begin with. We're already about a third of the way through. Laughing Jack never infiltrates anyone's dreams again. This ability to seemingly hypnotize the mother isn't utilized again. The only thing it establishes is some minor but unnecessary foreshadowing with the mutilated children. It reminds me of something that happens often in Jojo, where a character will reveal a power that their stand has only to never use it again, like how Kakyoin never possesses anyone after his initial appearance. Anyway, she wakes up and finds that James's toys are facing her like something out of a slightly darker Toy Story sequel, and he says that Laughing Jack did it. She laughs it off and doesn't think much of it, which is something I appreciate. Later that day, she checks on James after taking a nap and finds him in the front yard eating candy that she didn't give him. Now, she has very good reason to be worried, and again, that's something I appreciate. Mama Luigi is usually very rational and level-headed in this story. I just wish she had an actual character to her. James insists that it was Laughing Jack who gave him the candy, but she's not having any of it and gets rid of it all. She wonders if she's overreacting as none of the candy given to him seems to have hurt him any, which, no, you're fucking not. And that night they go to sleep as usual. What follows is a scene I have a lot of problems with. Mama Luigi is woken up by a loud bang in the kitchen and goes to check it out and finds the best character, the dog Fido, hung dead from a light fixture, cut open and stuffed with candy. The first of many problems here is that if you're going for an emotional response, you've completely failed, because we as the audience learn absolutely nothing about Fido like you would in something like Marley and Me, or even with Iggy in Stardust Crusaders. Dogs are absolutely characters just like people. They have personality and unique behaviors and characteristics. I think Iggy especially is a great example of this, as are the dogs I've had. Fido's name is fucking Fido. It's the most generic name imaginable outside of maybe Spot, because he's a blank slate to insert your dog here. The same honestly goes for the mother character. About half of marriages end in divorce, and of those divorces, over 80% have the mother with custody of the children. So she's basically a your mom here character, just as Spot is with dogs, because presumably a majority of the audience is going to have a single mother as a parent, or at least a sizable enough portion. By creating these generic blank slates, you make it so that it's easier for more impressionable, younger readers to relate to your characters. Hey, I was a son raised by a single mother growing up with a dog. I should relate to this story, right? Well, no, that's not how it works. This is something that newer writers and also people who constantly ask for more diversity in movies can take something away from. Characters don't need to be relatable in order to be well written, and doing so in as shallow a manner as this is a shortcut to writing good characters. Like, I played the Telltale Walking Dead game, and in that game you play as a 30-something black history professor and part-time murderer. You don't have to be any of those things to find the character of Lee Everett compelling or enjoyable. Hell, I certainly wasn't, and he's one of my favorite video game characters. Sure is a shame that the second season sucks so fucking much, but that's a topic for another day. Anyway, back to Fido. This death was 100% for shock value, and it takes a huge shortcut in doing that by doing it with a blank slate dog. Hey, wouldn't it be super scary if this happened to your dog? Never mind the one in the story. I don't have time to develop that character or make you feel anything for it. Now, I think this scene might be trying to be slightly comedic in nature, considering how the dog is stuffed with candy, but it doesn't go all the way there to make it something morbidly hilarious, like you'd expect from a story with laughing in the title. To give you an example, there's a scene in The Lost World Jurassic Park during the best part of the movie where the T-Rex is running around San Diego, and there's a particularly memorable scene where it drinks from a family pool and eats their dog. The difference with this scene and the one in Laughing Jack is that it's paced much better, and more importantly skips the gory details. It goes along lightning quick and it's over before you know it. It's a great example of black comedy or comedy of color depending on how politically correct you are. Meanwhile, Laughing Jack lingers on this. Instead of a quick-paced comedy, it's more like a Family Guy joke that drags on for 2.5 minutes.
Ah! 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 Ah!
So, in terms of shock, emotional connection, and humor, this scene fails in every aspect for me. Anyways, after Fido dies, they head to a neighbor's house because someone might still be in their house and call the cops. This is more logical behavior that is sorely missing from a lot of other creepypastas, and it's immediately undercut mere sentences later by having the police be absolutely useless and completely unhelpful. So here's how the story describes it. She calls the police and explains that someone has broken into their house, terrorized their son, and brutally murdered their dog. And the cops look at her like she's crazy. Does she live in Detroit? Is this sort of thing normal? Well, I guess if she were living in Detroit, the cops wouldn't have bothered to show up at all. Here's a quote from the story describing their investigation. They searched the house, but all they found was a dead dog and 2 trashed rooms. Oh, that's all they found. Nothing to worry about there. Case closed, Sherlock Holmes. So then the cops just fucking leave and don't really do anything or tell them anything. The family doesn't leave the house and stay in like a hotel or something. I mean, shit, that's what I'd do. I'd stay in a hotel while I hired someone to install some security measures in my house if it meant keeping my kids safe from some creep who killed our dog and broke into our house. But nothing comes of this. The mom is a bit more worried now when installs a baby monitor in James's room in case someone breaks into his room, but that's it. You're a single mom. What, is there no room in your bed? You can't sleep in the same room? It's stupid because she's been pretty reasonable up until this point, but now that something really horrible has happened, she's acting like a generic bad horror movie character. A generic bad horror movie is how I describe this whole story, really. You have the fake out dream sequence that doesn't mean anything, a lot of horror movies do to pad out the 90-minute runtime. It basically amounts to a slasher story, characters act stupid for the sake of advancing the plot. The only thing it's missing is predictable jump scares. So then we get the last 4 paragraphs of the story, which take it from a flawed pasta with weak characters that's not all that scary, but has potential, to a completely irredeemable shitfest. So the mom tries to sleep in her own room, completely disregarding the safety of her son from a psychotic stalker who has terrorized their family. She hears Silent Hill and radio noises coming from the baby monitor, followed by the laugh she heard in her dream. So I guess that had something to do with the story, although I would have run in there anyway had I heard any laughter at all. She grabs a knife and runs into her son's room and... Man, this part's gross. Part of me wants to spare you the details because it's just tasteless and nasty for no good reason. But another part of me wants to showcase just how desperate this story is to get a rise out of you. Basically, the story describes, in violent and graphic detail, a 5-year-old child nailed to a wall, gutted, with his eyes, tongue, and teeth removed. I'd like to ask you, what about this torture indicates that a paranormal clown entity had anything to do with this? I'd like to re-emphasize, Laughing Jack is a clown. I read a story earlier this year called Baggy Britches, and while I thought it was really weak, the main character at least acted like a clown. This is more like something out of a torture porn movie, like Saw or something, except on a child. It's almost like the author just made Laughing Jack a clown because the audience might already find clowns scary. Let's talk about that for a bit, because this is me coming back on the main character being a single mother being used in the most emotionally manipulative and lazy way possible. It was just to kill her kid. That's the only reason she was a single mom. And not just to kill her kid, but to kill him in the most violent and graphic way imaginable. We don't know anything about the kid, so it's basically just as bad as what we already had to go through in Squidward's suicide. It's just shock value. But this time the kid is stapled to a character we might care about if she were actually written better. So now it carries emotional manipulation on top of the shock value. That means this kid was used for the same exact treatment as the fucking dog. The child's death accomplishes the exact same thing that the dog's death already did. This child, a major character, our main character's primary motivation throughout the story, had as much agency in the story as the fucking dog. Christ, I need to move this along. So Laughing Jack shows up for real this time, and a disproportionate amount of time is spent describing Laughing Jack's appearance once again. This is so fan artists and cosplayers on DeviantArt can get a good idea of what it is they're drawing, so that they can later completely disregard that and instead draw some moe anime fuckboy like you'd see in Free. So it turns out James is still alive after all that, and Laughing Jack is yucking it up in his big stupid face. The mom pulls a line basically straight out of Aliens, and while it's not nearly as insulting as the ripped off line from The Shining in Jeff the Killer vs. Michael Myers, it's still really distracting, because all I can think about is Ripley in that fucking awesome ass robot suit, and how much I'd rather be watching Aliens. So she runs up to stab Laughing Jack, but he teleports behind you, nothing personnel kid, away, and she ends up stabbing James instead. So she's upset, cops show up now for some reason, they arrest her, she's in a mental asylum that's described as a house for the criminally insane because this story just isn't serious enough yet, and then it's implied that Laughing Jack is coming for her next. And that's the end of the story. So now that that shit show's over, let's talk about some things. What the fuck was Laughing Jack's plan or motivation to do anything that he did? And I'm not specifically talking about murdering some family. Whatever. I don't need to know all about that or even why it was this specific family. I mean, why did he go about this series of murders in the way that he did? Why would he drag it out over several days? Why alert the family to his presence? Why kill the dog? Why? If all he wanted to do was murder them, why didn't he just fucking murder them and be done with it? It's not like he has to do it, only at night because he can get caught. He can fucking teleport. It's not like he wanted anything out of them that only they could provide, so he had to keep them alive for a short while. How many single mother households are out there that he could do the same damn thing in? Like, if he wanted to just torture the mother psychologically by making her kill her own kid, he could have done that in one night easy. Just do exactly what you did the last night, but keep a knife on like the dresser near the doorway. Then she won't have to already have a knife ready. The torment of the family doesn't go on long enough that it seems like he's really torturing them or tenderizing them. It only lasts a couple of days, but it's not short enough that it makes any fucking sense why he couldn't just murder them all outright. If anything, his actions make even less sense, because like I was talking about earlier, if the family had been alert at all, like anyone would have been if someone had broken into your house and killed your dog, then wouldn't killing them be harder? Would he be able to accomplish his goal as easily if they had just gone to a fucking hotel? Or stayed with some friends that night? I mean, he was able to find the mom at the end when she was in a mental asylum, but that took like 2 months, so was there some sort of limitation on that kind of thing? We are not given nearly enough information on his limitations, on his characterization, on anything except his appearance. Even most iterations of Slender Man have limitations. Like in Marble Hornets, you can block him out if you take the proper medication. Shit, Tribe 12 seems to be setting up outright killing him, and Slender Man has substantially more abilities than Laughing Jack. I'm using Slender Man as a comparison here for a couple reasons. One, because Slender Man is just popular, so it's an easy example to pull out of my ass. And two, there's lots of similarities between Laughing Jack and Slender Man, almost to the point of being a ripoff. Both are tall, black and white colored humanoid entities with incredibly long, lanky arms. Both appear to have abilities based on mental manipulation or infiltration and teleportation. Both primarily target children. Both are known for gruesome dismemberments. Slender Man impales people on trees, or as seen in Everyman Hybrid's interpretation, mutilates them and stuffs them in garbage bags. Laughing Jack did this shit. The primary difference here is that while Slender Man doesn't have a personality, because having a personality would ruin the mysticism of his character, Laughing Jack doesn't have a personality because I just don't know. Why isn't he doing anything morbidly funny? I mean, Jeff the Killer already ripped off the Joker's appearance. You're telling me Laughing Jack couldn't rip off his personality? That would at least be more than nothing. I'd rather have something that's derivative but interesting than nothing at all. I know I bitch a lot about ripping off other people's work on this channel, which is ironic considering how much I ripped off and still kind of rip off RedLetterMedia, but being derivative is not a bad thing if you do something interesting with what you're deriving from. This is something I'll actually talk a lot about in October. The point I'd like to get across is, Laughing Jack fails as a character. He fails at having a motivation, and even as a monster, he is grossly outclassed in the same field by a character infinitely more popular and in many better written stories than he is. So I got this comment recently saying that the author of this story, who goes by the name Snuff Bomb, very appropriate, doesn't really care much for it these days. He recognizes its flaws and just thinks the story is mildly average at best. I can respect an author looking back at a work that got popular and seeing where he went wrong. That's something I actually really commend the Eyeless Jack author for doing as well. Also, I guess this is my competition, but he does have a creepypasta related YouTube channel and Patreon that updates about as regularly as mine does. I haven't watched any of his videos, mostly because a lot of them are podcasts that just don't really interest me, but something I'd like to say is please don't go into his comments and give him shit for this story. I mean, the story is bad, but just don't be assholes. And especially don't say shit like, fish stick on a stick sent me here, XD. Like a fish stick on a stick sent you here, because I can't fucking stand seeing those comments on any video I watch. It just confuses me when I don't know who the fuck sent them, and even then it's just annoying. Can't read any fucking comments on any video for The Chain by Fleetwood Mac ever since it was in Guardians of the Galaxy 2. It just gets old fast. Anyway, this is information I was pleased to hear because the last thing we needed was another JC the Hyena situation where he mistakenly believes the story is a masterpiece. It's also nice because I can be as harsh on the story as I want to be without, him just, oh man, I feel bad about this now. The story itself has been deleted from the wiki, although you can still find it very easily on creepypasta.org. And I think that's about it for anything Laughing Jack related. It's a story that had potential but didn't really go anywhere. It ripped off too much other shit without expanding on it. It just wasn't good. I mean, yeah, there's a bunch of spin-off stories, but none of them are really Oh.